Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. This is Rock and Roll Spot coming at you with a weekly TV roundup. As of lately, we will be starting with this past Friday's episode of Constantine. The episode opens in New Orleans as a off-duty and rather drunk cop sees a woman attacked by another woman. This one, the latter wearing a surgical mask and carrying a large pair of shears. He fires on the latter, but the bullets seem to pass straight through her, and the other woman dies, seemingly of stab wounds received from the shears. Back to the cabin outside of Atlanta. John, Chaz, and Zed utilize a zoetrope that once belonged to Queen Victoria and get a hit on the map in New Orleans. So the trio head there and promptly meet up with Detective Jim Corrigan, the cop from the intro of the episode. They check into hotels. John and Zed into another nice one, and Chaz into one of the chain ones. As John puts it, he likes to keep his points going. While this is going on, a hitchhiker is picked up about 40 miles outside of town by a man of somewhat questionable morals. Zed ends up having a vision of them crashing, and they do crash. And it turns out the hitcher is a spirit. The next morning, the trio go to the scene of the accident. John gets arrested on account of the fact that he called in a tip on the accident, technically before it happened. While speaking with Corrigan, John manages to get some info on the two spirits at large. While this is going on, Chaz is tracking the woman in the surgical mask, and in fact, he is briefly stabbed to death by her. It turns out the woman in the surgical mask was at one time a model who was had her face horribly scarred by a fellow model who was, of course, in prison for this and then sought psychiatric help and is actually doing much better now, though she does regret her actions, of course. John goes to talk with the living model, former model, and Zed goes to talk to the grandmother of the hitcher, and both reveal that they went to someone to unburden themselves of their guilt. Papa Midnight. John goes to talk to Papa Midnight, and does not entirely go too well. John ends up knocked unconscious and thrown in the trunk of a car. However, the next day, Midnight discovers that John was right, and that something has gone wrong with the spell he's working. As a third spirit is actually leeching the life away from a woman. A third spirit whom he just summoned is leeching the life away from said spirit's widow. Anywho, in light of this, Midnight proposes an alliance with John against the quote-unquote coming darkness. Zed and Corrigan decide to pick up the hitcher on their own. However, some pointed questioning causes the hitchhiker to quickly exit the vehicle. Meanwhile, John and Papa Midnight exhume the bodies of the that correspond to the spirits, planning to burn them and in the hopes of returning their spirits to their resting place. Initially it fails, as the bodies don't even catch, but then John realizes that those who came to Midnight need to let go, and he gathers the three there, and they let go, and so the bodies burn and the spirits vanish. Later on, Corrigan tells Zed what he knows of her, as it's made evident very early on that Corrigan does recognize her. And what he knows is that she was reported as a missing person with only one sighting ever, a shoplifting from a convenience store. However, the file now no longer exists. The two shake hands, and Zed has a vision of John bleeding rather profusely, mouth, chest, but at the same time he also appears to be surrounded, if not even shrouded, in green light. Much like his comic book alter ego, one version of Jim Corrigan, his comic book alter ego, the Spectre. Midnight then tells John that the coming darkness cannot be stopped, and that it will be heralded by someone close to John who will betray him. Now, on a side note concerning Constantine, it was announced earlier this week that the 13 episodes that were the initial order from NBC are all that will air for the first season, and a second season is questionable. So if you're not watching, I implore you, if it seems like a show you'd be interested in, check it out. Please, if you like it, please start watching it. If provided you're able, of course. Anywho, that said, moving on to Arrow. Opens with a flashback to Slade's siege of the city from the end of last season. Ollie saves the woman who is now, in fact, Cupid. Back in the present, Captain Lance and Ollie find the body of Ted's former sidekick, Isaac, who Cupid has actually dressed up as the Arrow. Her arrowheads are heart-shaped, though it takes everyone a while to notice this. In fact, they see him as being spade-shaped. At Queen Consolidated, Felicity is asked to accompany Ray to a business dinner. Also, Ray renames the company Palmer Technologies. By the way, I might add that Ray has gotten rented Felicity a very nice dress, as well as a very nice necklace to go with it. Ollie finds an address in Cupid's arrowhead, and the apartment in the address is littered with art clippings about the Arrow, as well as a phone which Cupid calls and tells Ollie who her next target is. It turns out that Cupid is a former Starling City PD SWAT officer who has been showing up at crime scenes relating to the Arrow. Also, she has issues with attachment. Ollie and Roy go after Cupid, and she knocks Roy out, and in fact almost blows up her current target, who was a mobster, but she still manages to escape. Diggle talks to Felicity about her, Ollie, and Ray. But at the same time, Ollie talks to Cupid's therapist, who, I might add, tells Ollie how to stop Cupid, and also suggests that Ollie could use some therapy himself. Cupid has an ally, basically kind of her version of Felicity, track down Ollie before she, kills him. Diggle then puts in his 2 cents about Ollie and Felicity. Ollie agrees to meet with Cupid, who threatens to destroy Verdant, the club, if Ollie is lying to her. Ollie meets Cupid at the same place he saved her at during the siege. She tries to kill him and herself. They fight, and eventually she tries to kill him and herself via subway tracks, though Ollie manages to save them both. Diggle manages to get Cupid put on the Suicide Squad, and Lila, in fact, says that Cupid is nuttier than the last woman on the squad, a nod to Harley Quinn. Ollie decides he's going to talk to Felicity about their feelings for one another, about his feelings for her, but when he gets to Palmer Technologies, he sees her and Ray kissing, which he does not take well. Afterwards, Ray in his office has a hologram rendering made of bugger. The Atom exosuit, hinting at his possible future activities. For those unaware, in the comics, Ray Palmer is the superhero and Justice League member known as the Atom. He can shrink to about the size of an atom. Closing out the current events of the episode, a man is killed in an alleyway with a boomerang, heralding the introduction of longtime Flash villain and also often a member of the Suicide Squad, Captain Boomerang. In the flashback, Ollie's handler goes to a meeting, leaving Ollie at home to learn how to do laundry. He is hours later, as he has yet to return home. Ollie and the handler's wife, Tatsu, go to look for him. They eventually, Tatsu ends up saving Ollie with her katana skills, and the two are led to believe that her husband is dead. They return home and are trying to figure out how to tell Tatsu's son that his father is dead, but it turns out that that is not the case. And in fact, Waller heard about the 3 killed agents and at the last minute changed the location of the meet. But yeah, that was last week's episode of Arrow. I have to admit, I'm very curious to see how the Captain Boomerang bit's going to play out. Moving on to this week's episode of Flash. Opens with a flashback to the night of the particle accelerator explosion. Trio of, I want to say, 20-somethings see the explosion from a power station. The shockwave of the explosion hits one of them who's playing on one of the I'm not even sure what they're actually called, but yeah, he's basically climbed up on there and it hits him, and he appears, at least seems that he is injured rather grievously. In the present, Professor Wells makes a log entry with his computer Gideon, which apparently has the newspaper headline about the Flash vanishing in a time of crisis. But he makes a log entry about Barry and his superhero activities, while Barry's making his way to Star Labs, in fact, during which Barry actually gets held up by a mugger, whom he rather quickly stops. After he arrives at shortly after arriving at Star Labs, Barry is called to a homicide, however, and notes that the victim was electrocuted due to the burn patterns around where the body is. After using facial reconstruction software to ID the victim, based on a picture of the remains, Barry goes to the power station from the beginning, or goes to a power station, and because as the man's ID was shown to be just recently used there, and he faces off with the guy from the intro, who is apparently feeding off the power station. Barry tries to stop him and is apparently fed off of as well, which causes him to lose his powers. Anyway, the electric vampire arrives at Star Labs and eventually causes a blackout as he wants to speak with Professor Wells about what's happened to him. The blackout spreads to the entirety of the city, allowing the Clock King from Arrow to take the police station hostage. And in the police station is, of course, Joe and Iris. The electric vampire fights last week's villain Tony, who Wells has released as a distraction, and it results in Tony's death. At the police station, Eddie, who is actually in hiding during the hostage situation, tries to stop Clock King and gets shot for it. Clock King ends up taking Iris hostage, and Eddie manages to pass along his backup piece to her. The entire reason with Clock King is as pissed off as he is because his sister was dying in the hospital, and he was not allowed to go and say goodbye to her. Joe convinces him to let Eddie, who may well die, say goodbye to Iris, and he whispers in her ear, her ankle holster. Back at Star Labs, Talon, Cisco, and Professor Wells realize that the loss of Barry's powers is actually a mental thing, and Wells decides to basically make a sacrifice play. While talking with like I said, the electric vampire, that's the best way to put it, really, Wells names off people who were killed or at least hurt in the explosion, including Ralph Dibny. I'm really hoping he was only hurt, for reasons, which I'll explain at the end. When our electric vampire strikes and tries to, fry Wells, Barry manages to click his powers back on and saves Wells and saves the day, in fact. The electric vampire once again tries to feed off of him, but apparently it's too much for him, and it's explained that basically he choked and to death on that. To that point, Barry goes to the police station to check on Joe and Iris, and learns that Iris shot Clock King, and that Eddie will be all right from his injuries, though he's hopped up on pain meds at the time. So Barry's able to use his super speed in front of him, and no one says anything about it. Barry tells Professor Wells that he's ready to see just how fast he really can go. Later on, Wells takes a blood sample from the now dead electric vampire, who Cisco briefly called Blackout, so he can figure out just how it was he was able to take away Barry's speed. Now, as I mentioned, Ralph Dibny. Actually, as Professor Wells mentioned, Ralph Dibny. Ralph Dibny is a long-standing Justice League member in the pre-New 52, known as the Elongated Man. He is a detective, and he's stretchy, and he also is in the comics, he actually has no secret identity. Everyone knows that Ralph Dibny is the Elongated Man. He and his wife were at the center of the miniseries Identity Crisis about, I want to say, 8 years or so ago. It was a while ago, but actually I think it was longer than that. I think it may have been 9 years ago. Either way, it's a murder mystery involving superheroes, and in my opinion, damn fine read. Anyways, moving on to Gotham. We open at Wayne Manor with a yard worker getting killed by a professional killer and her accomplices. Inside, Bruce and Selina are working on Bruce's balance on the banisters when the lead assassin comes to the door and attacks upon seeing Selina. Bruce and Selina escape to the city while Alfred tries to hold off the attackers. They actually manages to shoot one of them while trying to escape. Of course, Alfred calls Gordon. They talk about it, and Alfred is not happy, obviously. However, it's believed that Lovecraft, the the businessman that Harvey Dent was speaking with in last week's episode, is behind the hit. So Gordon decides he'll go after Lovecraft, while Bullock and Alfred hit the streets to find Bruce and Selina. Meanwhile, Falcone tries to find out who it was that stole his money. First through the Penguin, then through intimidating his lieutenants, and in fact killing one at a meal for all of them. Upon arriving in the city, Selina tries to ditch Bruce, knowing full well that the assassins were actually there for her and not him. But she ends up leading him through Gotham's underbelly. Bullock and Alfred have a talk with Fish Mooney about Selina's whereabouts, or at least the whereabouts of her fence, to hopefully find her that way. Selina and Bruce talk with Ivy, who was in the first episode, about Selina's fence as well. Gordon finds Lovecraft, who is actually in hiding from the same killers who are after Selina. However, the killers pop up at where Lovecraft's hiding and knock out Gordon and then kill Lovecraft with Gordon's gun. Selina's fence has betrayed her to the killers. In fact, she was trying to fence off a few things she had stolen from Wayne Manor: a pen, Bruce's watch, various other knickknacks. The fence imprisons Selina and Bruce until the killer, and they decided to try to escape. And they managed to lead the group of killers on a chase throughout the building until Selina escapes and Alfred finds Bruce. Afterwards, the mayor gives Dent and Gordon a bit of a dressing down, and it's decided that Gordon will be the scapegoat for this, and will, in fact, he ends up being reassigned to Arkham Asylum. At the end, Selina slips back into Wayne Manor to say goodbye to Bruce, and return the items she stole, and give him that kiss. Also, Alfred comments that it seems a lot quieter without Selina around, and it seems to be he's saying that it's not entirely a good thing that it's that quiet. So, to a degree, he misses her. All right. Moving on to Scorpion. The episode opens with Walter bailing his sister out of jail on a litany of charges, including public intoxication, if I remember correctly. And she convinces him to let her meet the team and spend the day with him. Shortly after the introductions are made, the team gets called to an airbase where an experimental plane was being monitored until it crashed in Bosnia. The team is tasked with recovering experimental stealth tech from the crashed plane. In Bosnia, though, they are also accompanied by a SEAL team. In Bosnia, the team itself is split by an attack by rebel forces after the vehicle they're in gets a flat in the woods. Also, it's worth noting that Sylvester has stayed behind and is keeping an eye on Walter's sister, as well as helping them via computer and phone. They're about 10 miles from the plane's crash site. The split basically ends up being Happy and Toby, and then everyone else. So Happy and Toby, Walter, the military team leader, butt heads a bit, as neither one really likes the other. At the crash site, the team finds that the rebels have stolen the stealth software and kidnapped the pilot, who we see as being tortured for the encryption code for the software. Turns out that Happy messed up her ankle during the firefight. Toby treats the injury as best he can, and he actually reveals why he became a shrink and also his feelings for her. Soon, after doing some more walking, the pair find a potential ally. And in fact, is the person who was responsible for the plane going down. Though he did not realize he was bringing down a plane, he was being paid in porn. In fact, anyways, Walter's sister and Sylvester find a box of mementos of the team as well as his sister. Sylvester ends up telling her how he and Walter met, and it was, yeah. Anywho, back to Bosnia. The team finds the rebel base where the pilot and the software are. Walter and the leader of the military group rescue the pilot, having put aside their differences after saving each other's lives, including, minefield, and prevent the rebels from decrypting the software. The team returns home after picking up Happy and Toby, and Walter takes his sister to the beach to watch the sunrise over the ocean before taking her back to the hospital. Anyway, there was some rather predictable stuff. The whole thing with Walter and the leader of the military group butting heads. It's pretty much given that, okay, by the end of the episode, they're going to be buddies. Or at least the military leader is going to see Walter as an equal and think well of him. That was pretty obvious. Anyway, again, not a bad episode. I was actually kind of impressed by this one. Anyways, moving on to Sleepy Hollow. We open up with Abby and Ichabod playing a cell phone version of Headbands, I guess. The game where you write a well-known person, be it fictional character or historical person, and you put like a card on your head with the name, and the other people have to guess who you. The other will give you clues so you can guess who yours says you are. But then they're basically trying to unwind that as they've gone over the diary numerous times. Anyways, Katrina contacts them through a mirror. They speak briefly, but then she hears a noise and has to cut contact off. She leaves the room, and then Henry comes in and basically reinitiates contact with the mirror and watches and listens in on Abby and Ichabod as they discover a potential weapon, the Sword of Enoch, also the Sword of also known as the Sword of Methuselah, apparently. Abby gets a text about checkpoints for Captain Irving, and she informs Jenny, who is taking him to Canada. Abby and Ichabod discover that the sword is near, and that the Join or Die political cartoon from the 1700s is actually somewhat of a map to the sword. For those unaware, the Join or Die political cartoon basically shows a snake cut into 13 parts and says Join or Die at the bottom. The snake being what will become the United States. The 13 parts representing the 13 colonies. Very nice. I thought it was kind of a neat thing to do, really. Anyway, Irving and Jenny come upon a checkpoint that was not amongst those that Abby told Jenny about, which of course makes them pretty much figure that they're widening their search net. So Irving basically jumps from Jenny's car and the plans to meet her at a bridge and keep going into Canada. Abby and Ichabod find the sword's resting place. However, it's also found by the horsemen at about the same time. However, while they are Ichabod has distracted the horsemen long enough for the sunrise to come along and stop him in his tracks, at least until nightfall. Flashback reveals that it was Abraham, the horseman, who eventually convinced Ichabod to come to the colonies. Abby and Ichabod discover the sword's resting place. However, it is guarded by a Gorgon. And as they initially see what they perceive to be statues, but are actually petrified explorers. Irving ends up contacting Jenny and lets her know that he's not going to Canada to hide. He's gonna go underground and find some way to keep fighting. Abby and Ichabod decide to, since they know that locking eyes with the Gorgon will petrify them, use someone who has no eyes to fight the Gorgon. The Horseman. Henry taunts Katrina, revealing that he found the poison that she tried to use on Moloch as a baby Moloch. She then says that she hesitated, and well, he tells her that this night, Moloch will truly be born on Earth. Will be at his full power on Earth. Abby and Ichabod lure the Horseman into a fight with the Gorgon, which the Horseman wins. Chops off the Gorgon's head. Just during the fight, Abby and Ichabod go into the resting place of the sword and find a circle of swords, and they basically have to choose which one it is. Ichabod opts to to basically distract the winner of the fight between the Horseman and the Gorgon, which ends up being the Horseman. This leads to Ichabod and the Horseman dueling one another once again. Ichabod with a sword, the Horseman with his axe. Abby picks up a sword, and it causes all of the swords, including the one she picked up, to turn into snakes and then slither away. The Horseman taunts and almost kills Ichabod. However, he's stopped when he hears the sound of Henry's war horn. Basically, he basically tells them that they've won the night. The sound of that horn means that they've won. Abby and Ichabod continue to think of things over and figure out just how to retrieve the sword, as it was not where they thought it was initially. Same building, but not in this amongst the circle of swords. They retrieve the sword, and then that night, Moloch greets the Horseman upon arriving in his true form on Earth, and that's the episode. Anywho, it should be interesting to see where they're going with Irving. I know apparently next week is, if I remember correctly, the mid-season finale. Next week, the week after, I think next week. So that should be interesting to see where things go from there. Anywho, all that being said, first off, to reiterate, if you're not watching Constantine and you're able to, I highly please do so. Please, a second season would be awesome. Also, with the holiday coming up, let's wish all my viewers a safe and happy holiday, a safe and happy Thanksgiving. I know I will be having a wonderful Thanksgiving with my family tomorrow. So that's all I got for now, and I'll be back on Saturday. As always, live long, rock hard.